Good morning and welcome to the Open Access Office at the University of Edinburgh, and also to Ramblings with Rebecca. I got into the office a little bit early today and I am far overdue for an episode, so here we are. Welcome to the 23rd of April, which means all kinds of things. It's the day after Earth Day. Yay, Earth! It's Wednesday. Hello, Wednesday. And it's also the day after most of the law school at the University of Edinburgh had all of their essays due, aka freedom. Yes, so all of the essays are in. It was a grand weekend of writing. So I figure I've kind of already rambled about whales quite a lot, which was the essay for international environmental law. That was it was good to review. The question was strengths and weaknesses of the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, as shown by this recent case, Australia versus Japan, New Zealand intervening. So it was really quite fun to do one essay that was essentially based on, like one legal convention and one case, and really grappling with all of that language quite a lot. That was fun. That was probably the most lawyery thing I've done this year. It's not something that I necessarily want to do for the rest of my life. Becca has not become a lawyer via this round of essays either, but it was really cool. And then one on the generations of human rights, which I've rambled about quite enough at you, I'm sure. But one of the essay choices for climate change law was pretty much perfectly suited to me. And it was, what relevance, if any, does international human rights law have for global climate change? Interestingly, that question was not actually phrased as a climate change law question per se, because it was about human rights law to climate change, not to climate change law. So that was fun. It kind of made it more of a human rights law question than a climate change law question, but I wasn't complaining. So I figured I'd chat a little bit about that, because we've talked about climate change, we've talked about environmentalism, we've talked about human rights, blah, 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 blah. We haven't necessarily talked about the interplay. There's a good amount of debate over whether or not the environment is a human right, explicitly. It is in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It is explicitly said that people shall have a right to an environment, which includes a lot of language around sustainability and healthy lifestyles and whatnot. So in that regional human rights document, there is a legal right to the environment, which has led to very groundbreaking, I would say, decisions on cases. Because courts in Africa are thus able to go further if an environmental issue is brought using that human rights legal framework than they can say in Europe, where there's not explicitly a human right to the environment. Obviously, human rights to the environment are connected to right to life, right to health, right to employment, right to land and property, these kind of things. So there have been a lot of cases that have dealt with environmental issues working on those other rights that are interrelated, but not at the European or international level explicitly, this violates your right to the environment, because there's not a legal setup to do that with. It's also should be noted that a human right to the environment is not necessarily the same thing as a human right to protection from climate change. Exactly. Depending on the time scale, that kind of thing. It's human rights for future generations are particularly tricky. It's difficult to sue on behalf of a future person in human rights law. And some people say, you can't do this at all, right? I mean, the law protects extant victims, existing human beings, and then also identifiable perpetrators. So you need someone to sue, and you need someone to sue. Right, and if it's the global community as a whole versus, child 3 generations down the line, that's tricky. Other lawyers point out that we have laws that protect future interests all the time, land trusts, fiduciary trusts for inheritance, yada yada yada. So it could be done. It's just the system's not currently set up to allow for it very well. But human rights do have a lot to say about the way we respond to climate change. So in adaptation measures and in taking care of people who have been hit by disasters that may be climate change related and that kind of thing. Certainly human rights influences the policies that we need to do, as well as responses too, right? Because we need to protect from deforestation, but we also need to protect the rights of indigenous people who, subsist on the forest and those kind of things. So lots of interactions, even though perhaps not as systematically as they should be.